welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. I'm Chris Lucian, and I'm joined by my co-host, Austin Chadwick. And today, our wonderful guest is Alex Berry. And we are here to talk about mobbing, the Mob Time app, and along with some other great mobbing topics. So, Alex, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, and then we can kind of jump into the Mob Time app and then see where it takes us from there.
Sure. So I'm Alex. I work at Vehicle. We're a cool consultancy in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. Maybe hire us for some of your stuff. Let's see. I'm a self-taught software dev. So since I was like 13 and I'm 32 now, so for a while. Started in the old QBasic IBM 5150s, which were pretty awful but great. And now I write stuff for the web, and of course Mob Time and a couple other things that no one's heard of or no one cares about, but that's okay. Mob Time's been pretty fun. Yeah, I don't know. That's me.
Nice.
I'm a cool, chill guy.
All right.
Nice.
Well, I think our audience is really curious. What is Mob Time?
So, some people like pitchforks and torches, and they just want to organize together. And so Mob Time is, of course, for mob programming, or as I hear some rebranding is ensemble programming. So depending on your flavor, it's all the same.
Well, also, did you know that a mob is a herd of kangaroos?
Oh, I did not know that.
We never were talking about a mob with pitchforks. Like, it's always been a herd of kangaroos, but just no one seems to get it.
Oh man, I need to throw a kangaroo in the Mob Time logo somewhere then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, what was the original question? What's Mob Time?
What is Mob Time?
Yeah, so Mob Time is a real-time collaborative mob programming timer built completely out of necessity. So maybe some backstory. At Vehicle, over the last, I'm going to say 2 years now, we've been transitioning to doing all of our client work in mobs. And I think at this point, most of our teams are mobbing. And of course, COVID hits and everyone's working from home. And of course, there's some other options like Mobster, which I think we even used at the Boston conference last year, and it was pretty good. But we were finding that like we've all got our browsers open, and we all have our own browsers. We usually have second monitors. It's kind of great to throw a timer up there and have something where Bob in his house can set the timer, and someone else can modify it and play around with it. So Mob Time was born out of just getting Vehicle off the ground and giving us some good timers. We were using other stuff too, like we have remote desktop and like was it like Pomodoro timer or something like that, and that was working out okay. But I was just like, hey, this would be cool to make, so yeah. I did it, and here we are.
What are some of the benefits that you've seen with a distributed timer over maybe a remote timer that you might have had otherwise?
Yeah, like the biggest thing is like with remote, you're stuck on one screen, right? Like you don't have a lot of shared space. So just having like I put it on my phone, and my phone's just kind of docked in front of my monitor, and I can just reach over and tap stuff without really ruining the flow of what I'm doing on the screen. Which works for me. I was actually mobbing with some fine gentlemen in Europe. Hi guys, and they actually just stuck it up on the remote screen, and I was like, hey, you can put this on your own screen. So they're like, yeah, we don't do that. And I was like, oh, okay. Cool. But yeah, I really like the fact that everyone can kind of mob on the timer as well, right? Like throw some goals up, and as features and requests have rolled in, we've kind of added things like having, I think one of the requests that turned out much better than I think anyone expected was just being able to customize like the role positions, because at work we always do it so it's like navigator, driver, and then everyone else is just like in line or whatever. And someone's like, no, we do it the opposite. It's always driver, navigator. It'd be great if there's a checkbox to switch those. And I was like, well, why don't we just have a comma separated list and you can put whatever you want in there? And they're like, wow, this is so good. And I was like, hey, cool. And of course, at work, we use it for fun titles like, like the boss and employee, or, king and peasant, things like that.
Nice.
That's awesome. So Austin, I think you've been using this timer for mobbing for a week or two now or so. What have you noticed that's maybe different?
Yeah, it is super cool. It is the first time I've used kind of a more distributed timer. So that's been really cool. And I think that's one benefit that I didn't really think of before with the other timer until we used this one was, when people come in, enter and exit a mob, and this happens a lot, especially if you're kind of doing like a more of a learning session where kind of people are in or out, or you're kind of doing like a workshop where that's definitely the case. People are coming in and out. And you did break the flow quite a bit and be like, oh, remember to add someone to the timer. And so we'd be trying to remember like, okay, the next time the timer goes off, add them, or stop work and then let's add them, kind of thing. And it was important because you don't want to leave someone out of the flow, right? But you also don't want to break the flow, and so is this, so it was really nice. And it was fun. We experimented a lot with it. So like, we'd put it on our phones. We've tried it on all these different phones. We tried it on the computer, tried the notifications, turn on the sound. So it does that little like foghorn sound. And that was really fun. And it's just really cool. The one thing that really jumped out to me right away is just the homepage. So when you go to the homepage, one really cool thing about distributed timer is you can see how many other people are mobbing right now. So it's like, oh, so many people have a timer running with so many live users. And that's just kind of like a cool community feel, as opposed to just like, oh, we're in our mob and we have our own little timer. You're kind of connected to the rest of the mob community at the same time. And so I thought that really jumped out to me. And we've been enjoying it. It's been good. And so I guess, can you tell me a little more about the goals section? Like what led you guys to that? Is that like your replacement of Kanban? So like for those of you who can't see, there's like a goals section in the app where you can put some goals in there. So do you guys use that for your Kanban, or is it kind of a different purpose, or?
So that actually, that came about because one of the teams, the way that they were stuck mobbing is they were working on a Unity project and they had to all like remote into this one computer. And it was, I guess, like taxing or a pain to switch between like, I think they were using GitHub projects or issues, and they just kind of get fed up with it. So they just wanted to kind of dump whatever issues they wanted to work on that day just into that. And then they kind of had it all in one spot, which worked out. And then, so actually maybe I'll talk about a neat coming up feature, I should say, is I've had a lot of people request like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you integrated with like one of these 10 services, which would be great if my server was actually like a smart server, but it's just a dumb like relay. So I'm actually working on some background tooling. So maybe you could connect this background tool to your GitHub issues and have it like sync up your goals with that and check things off as you complete them. And hopefully that'll pave the way to like some nice integrations that mob time itself doesn't have to be responsible for, but you'll be able to basically have like a bot connect up and manage your like goals or people. So
that's super cool. Yeah. So we, one thing that was also really cool that stood out to me was when you share, all you have to do, I don't know if I should show the 3D barcode because then people will scan it. I don't know. Maybe that won't do it.
If you just put in a random timer.
Yeah. So this is like a random timer running. And so when you want to share it with somebody, you just go to the share screen and there's a 3D barcode. And so someone can just like hold up their phone, take a picture of it. I thought that was really fun. Quick way to share it.
When you watch this episode, you should scan the barcode and see how many people are on that timer.
Yeah, and what's kind of funny is that was my initial like kind of adoption phase. So at Vehicle, everyone was kind of using their own timer. Some people just had their stopwatch on their phone and whatever, and other people had like Pomodoro or whatever timers. So I was like, hey, what's the easiest way for me to do this? Well, if I just generate an image, I can just drag it into our like Slack chat, or we can just put it temporarily up on our shared desktop, and people can just scan it, and then we forget about it on the desktop and just use it on our phones. And I think it worked pretty well. At this point, I don't know who's still using the barcode scanning, just because you can kind of use the same URL over and over again if you want, but it made it so I think almost everyone at Vehicle now is, or at least all the teams are using it. So I guess it worked. I don't know if people still use it though, but it's cool that you found it and that you liked it. So.
Nice. Yeah, so maybe it's a good way to transition topics. I've noticed to the topic of mobbing with others and maybe new people. So I've noticed recently on Twitter that you and a previous guest on the show, Harold, and actually a couple previous guests on the show have been mobbing together on mob time. So what's that been like?
Yeah. So I only joined one session. The unfortunate thing is, I think for them, it was like their Monday evenings, but for me, it's my Monday afternoons while I'm still at work. So I happened to have one day off. I think it was like Canadian Thanksgiving. And they just happened to ask me like a day or two before. Harold messaged me. It was just like, hey, you want to join on Monday? I was like, oh, sure, why not? And that was pretty fun. Like, especially coming from, I have never had a conversation with any of these humans before in my life, and was able to jump on. They're all pretty friendly, and it was pretty fun.
Nice. Yeah. I think I noticed that in general about the mob community out there is that you'll find you can do a pickup mob very quickly, very easily, and just have some fun programming. And so there's a number of times where I just jumped in. Either I was at a conference and sat down, or I've just been online in a group and we just start mobbing on stuff. And so, yeah, it's really cool to see that, and how accepting the community is. I think that people that want to mob probably have some pretty cool personalities. So I like that about the community.
Yeah. I think Bob Allen called them flash mobs for a while there.
Yeah, flash mobs. Yep.
Nice. So, yeah, any tips or tricks for mobbing with people out of the blue like that?
Yeah, so like anyone new that I've mobbed with, especially if they've never mobbed before, I kind of give them the rules that it's okay to not write code, to write code that will not ever work, or, to take the time to like read what we need to do and explain it, make comments, pseudocode, do whatever it takes to like communicate what needs to be done. And that's been pretty successful in most of my mobs. I mean, everyone's still afraid of like, oh, what if I don't know how to do this? And I'm like, who cares? Just write the fantasy function that you think is going to work, and we'll, the great thing about code is it's pretty easy to delete a line and replace it with something else or whatever. It's like pretty low effort, especially on the web. I mean, maybe not compiled languages, but yeah.
Nice.
That's my biggest thing. Just make mistakes. I think Magic School Bus, make mistakes and get messy.
Yeah.
Is the line Miss Frizzle says. I'm all about that.
Good advice. It's important to fail fast, fail often, and learn from your failures.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think I second that. I mean, I think the kind of psychological safety and social comfort is probably the biggest barrier when you're mobbing with people who haven't mobbed before. So we'll take on visitors, and sometimes they're expert mobbers, and they're like coaching us, which is pretty fun. Or it's people who've never mobbed in their life. I've even mobbed with someone who's never written a code in his life. It was a workshop, and he's never seen code or written code, and he was part of the mob. And I think you're right. I mean, I think setting the stage by basically saying like, hey, here's some, like you said, so here's some ground rules. It's totally okay to try ID and not know. It's okay to be in the navigator seat and not know what's going on, you know what I mean, and ask for help. And then I think not manufacturing mistakes, but if you make a mistake, make it very obvious to everyone you did, and that it's okay. Yep. Yeah, I think making fun of myself in the mob is one of my favorite hobbies. So
it's actually funny since you say that. I always especially for like some of our like newer hires and stuff. If they get into my mob, I always make sure that the serious level is very low. So if someone makes like a really awful typo, I'm like, nope, keep it. Or, variable name, it's going to be tacos. If you don't know what it is, just tacos, burritos. You just keep going through Mexican cuisine until you run out. And then, anything that just like makes everyone aware that we're here to have fun. We're here to write some code, learn some stuff. Because, being in a group and feeling like you're being judged is maybe one of the worst feelings any human being has to deal with. So if you can like lower that feeling to as close to zero, it's pretty great.
Yeah, I totally agree. So maybe this one's maybe a tangential question, but my interest is peaked now on a little bit on Vehicle. What was their story with mobbing? How did mobbing come about, and how's it going so far?
Yeah. So one of the bosses, so Chris and Grant are the bosses, and Chris takes care of, I think, more clients, and Grant is more other stuff. And he got into mobbing. I don't know if it was just through books or if he just kind of came across Woody on Twitter, or like how that came, but then it kind of turned into like, oh, well, why don't we have like a bit of an experiment? Let's give it a shot. And for myself, the previous company I was at, I did like a lot of pair programming, which really isn't that different, all things considered. So my team, and I think maybe one or two other ones, were kind of like test pilots. And we also did kind of things whereas in an afternoon, there'd be an hour and a half of a fun mob that anyone could just kind of jump into and mess around if they had some free time. And if they didn't, it wasn't a big deal. And it's just been kind of like snowballing to like, oh, it's working for these teams. Let's see if we can get a few more teams on, or a few more people.
Wow.
And it seems to be going pretty smoothly. I mean, I'm a team lead, so I'm kind of stuck on my team, so I don't know what the other teams are doing, but I think it's going well. No one's complained. I mean, certainly now being all distance, there's like a bit of an extra cognitive load, just because you're not in person, so you have to communicate so much more like expressively, because like you lose a lot of body language and things like that. But I know my team, we mob all day and it's great, but we're a very chill team. I think we have some other teams that maybe have like higher stress clients or things like that, and that's okay. And they end up mobbing like maybe for half the day, then the other half they solo, just to kind of relieve any sort of stress. But
nice.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the idea of mobbing came to the company from the founders and then trickled down to everyone. I find that very fascinating. So that's a cool side effect. I was on the opposite end of it. We started mobbing, and then more and more of the companies started doing it. So it's you hear it from either direction, or even somewhere in the middle, like middle management or something like that. So it's cool to see the variations on how mobbing can come into a company. So
yeah, for sure. I guess like to toot Vehicle's horn a little bit too. There's been like certainly a focus on making sure that employees are like happy and working well together. So like Grant, especially, he does a lot of like reading on how to have like a good work environment, what makes employees happy, especially in software, because it's kind of high stress. We got deadlines all the time and a lot of churn. And this was, I guess, one of the ways that he was like, hey, let's experiment, see how it goes. And he's a smart, philosophical guy. Hi, Grant. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. And yeah, it's been working pretty great so far.
Nice. Yeah. How long has it been since the first experiment?
I'm gonna say it's got to be pretty close to 2 years at this point.
nice.
Sounds about right. I mean, I'm sure someone's gonna, they'll hear the podcast and be like, "No way, it's been this long." And I'll be like, "I don't know."
Especially a whole bunch of messages from Slack.
Yeah, for sure. But like with COVID, like every day just kind of rolls into one.
Mm-hmm.
This whole year's been like a week.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I feel that way too. Very strange.
Yep.
Nice.
All right,
Nice.
maybe we can change gears a little bit and talk about Teammate and Vim for seamless group programming. So
Oh, I thought you would never ask, Chris.
this sounds like maybe a mobbing cocktail of some kind of tools. So maybe you can walk us through that.
Okay, so I'm gonna give full credit to my old boss and business partner later on, Dave Rappin. If you're listening to this, thank you. So he was really into Vim, and at that point, I had no idea how to Vim. I'd sit down and be like, I don't get this. This is weird. And we started using it for mobbing, and eventually, so one of our ways to do mobbing, which was pretty great to get like any new employees up, is we had a bunch of, I think we used Linode servers or whatever, doesn't matter. And we just we had WeMux running, which was like a shared session tmux. So basically, we'd run WeMux on the server and then connect into that. And then because we're like in a terminal, we'd use Vim, and it worked out pretty well. Like we evaluated a handful of things like shared terminal or shared desktops and things, and everything like there's a trade-off for everything, right? So you've got with desktops, you're probably going to get some lag and maybe like graphical artifacts. With terminal, there's obviously more of a learning curve. But we went down that route. I think the fellow I was paired with had used Vim quite a bit. I didn't, but you learn the basics pretty quick. It's not, everyone thinks it's this like crazy wild thing, but in reality, it's just like if you understand insert mode and normal mode, then like you're
as long as you have a Sherpa to guide you, I think you're pretty good. You're pretty well off in Vim.
Yeah.
If you're there by yourself, you're just like, I don't even know how to feed myself now. Like,
yeah, it was basically like 2 months of just like pure struggle, and then the fellow I was with was like, "Hey, do you know about Vim Tutor?" And I was like, is that like a website?" And he's like, "No, just type in Vim Tutor in your terminal." So he did that, and it shows you like the basic like motions and like here's how to edit stuff. And I was like, "Oh, okay, I get it." And I think we were using at the time like I don't think it was the thoughtbot files, but it was something like forked off of that or something. So you had all these nice configurations and power line and everything to make your terminal look nice and fancy. So I got used to that at previous company I was at. And one thing I like about it is there's no error. The only error is like your socket connection dies or something like that. Whereas I've tried the VS Code live share a couple times, and I find that got out of sync very easily. Like all it took is someone to like delete a file unexpectedly or something, and then all of a sudden it'd be like, oh, I can't see your cursor anymore. I can't follow you, or I can't edit. And yeah, every experience I've had with that was bad. There's been people at Vehicle that love it and use it every day, and I don't know how they do it, but I'm happy that it works for them. Yeah. And anyway, so from the old company, we're using WeMux, and eventually I found a thing called Teammate, which it works exactly like WeMux, other than there's like some server on the internet that's just like a proxy for your Tmux session. So it just proxies your own system up, and then anyone can connect in. And I started using that, and of course, any Vim nerd eventually they start making their own plugins and customizations, and that's where I'm at now. So with all my mobbing sessions, what I like to do is throw everyone into the terminal. I'm just like, hey, we don't need any of this stuff. You don't need all your fancy IDE tools. Let's just write some code. We don't need any distractions. And I'll do like a 10-minute tutorial at the beginning just to take them through my shortcuts of like, hey, here's how you do this. I'm going to show you. Now you do it. And you go through the 5 or 6 of those, and then for 45 minutes we can all mob, and everyone can like chime in for keyboard shortcuts or whatever, and it's worked out pretty well. I have like a stable like 5 people coming out to some of my like work fun mobs with that, so I guess that means at least it works for 5 people. I have fun anyway.
Nice. This is fascinating for me. I've never even conceived of mobbing in this way. So that's and when you put that as a topic, I'm like, I don't even know what he's talking about there. So
Nope.
that is so cool. So you're in the terminal, and okay. So I guess one follow-up question I have is, often when we're mobbing on like a more visual type mobbing experience with like you have a Mac or Windows open and it's got the full all the apps and everything you could do. We'll do email together. We'll also diagram together. There's things we'll do together other than code. Does that kind of thing occur in this terminal mode? I guess you just do the terminal style.
Yeah, like I'm mostly doing like web code, so we can forward out a port and people can connect in. But we haven't done any like diagramming, but I'm guessing we would probably do I don't know, there's a few good like just online free diagram whiteboard things that you can just go on, which I guess we'd use those. Honestly, I've never gotten to that point. Usually our clients will just throw a random design or just be like, oh, whatever you think looks best. And we just kind of throw A, B, and C together, make it work. Yeah. I mean, the beauty of the web code too is, you just refresh the browser, see what it looks like.
You can change it every time and you just refresh it. Yeah. So.
Yep.
But you're in the terminal for modifying the code, and the code is in one place. And so everybody is remoted into that terminal. Do they all share the same cursor? Like, do they see that where the line is and they can all type into the same place through the terminal that way?
Yep. It's just one straight standard in, right? So if anyone types, it all just kind of collapses.
It's all
into
basically
one.
the same user typing at the same time, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, and then I guess on top of that, so a year or two ago, I just happened to come across this repo called Git Pair by GitHub user BDO, who I believe is from France. Cool guy. And anyway, I started tinkering with that, and so now for all of our commits, it like co-authors people, right? So usually if I start with a bunch of new people, I just open up the config file. I'm like, all right, let's just enter all of our names and stuff so we can make sure we all get recognition if that's what people are into, get all the fame and glory,
or the blame for what goes wrong.
And the blame, definitely the blame. Let me tell you, if something goes wrong, I'm looking at those commits. I'm figuring out.
Yeah. You're saying you were one of the 4 people that were working on this. Do you have any idea?
Yep.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, for sure.
So you mob in Vim day to day all the time like that? Is that?
I wish. So my current team is really hard set on PHP Storm.
Okay.
I mean, we're mostly a Laravel shop, and my project is Laravel, so they're all pretty comfortable with that. But anytime I do a mob outside of client work, then I'm like, you guys are all doing Vim. You're gonna love it. And I've converted a couple people.
Yeah.
So I feel like slowly, the roots are sinking in, and people are just going to be stuck. And at some point, they're going to be like, I don't even know why I have PHP Storm installed.
Yeah. There you go.
I mean, I've never done Vim, but there is a great refactoring video called "Refactoring from Good to Great" by Ben Orenstein, who's also, I think, if I'm following Twitter correctly, has also been making a pairing and mobbing tool. But the video, which we'll put in the show notes, is him doing a bunch of refactorings in Ruby and Vim. So for me, I was like, oh, great refactoring video, but I don't know Ruby, and I have no idea. At the time, I had no idea what Vim was. And it was quite impressive. It was quite impressive to watch it in action, but I've never tried. So
yeah, I mean, when you have the right plugins and setup, you can do a lot of things really quickly. Now, I'm not like a Vim ninja. I'm more like the Vim construction guy that like I'm smart enough to wear my construction hat so I don't get like beat in the head too much. But like I'm just wandering around the construction site, drinking my coffee, looking busy so the foreman doesn't fire me. Like, yeah.
Nice, awesome.
It's like that. Yeah. I mean, from what I understand, I've used Vim a little bit, but from what I understand, you can get some really awesome refactoring tools, and it's just convincing anybody else to use them with you is the hard part.
For sure.
Yeah. Very cool.
Nice.
So I assume that on mob time you've used a lot of Vim to work on mob time. Then
Yeah.
Awesome.
Actually, so we can talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah.
So one thing about mob time is I wanted to have the least number of complex tools possible.
Yeah.
I kind of stopped using React. I used to be a big React fanboy and I loved it.
Right.
And nowadays you've got to use their create React app command line tool that like brings in like 500 dependencies, and like a couple hundred megabytes later you're like good to start developing. And
Yeah.
I was just like, man, this sucks. Like, why is this like the de facto way to make a web app?
Sure.
So I'm part of a community ran by the hyper app creator Jorge Bucaron. I think that's the right pronunciation. I'm really sorry, Jorge, if I said it wrong, but we're still buds. And anyway, so hyper app is like a really lightweight front end application development library. I can throw in some more buzzwords too. I don't know which ones, but one of the really cool things about it is it's intentionally built so you don't have to do any build steps.
Yeah.
So all the code is just like the HTML5 like script module, all the new fancy stuff. So I'm sure mob time will not work in Internet Explorer. I'm pretty solidly sure that won't happen, but uses modern tools so you don't have to have these like megabytes worth of downloads per hit or anything like that.
Yeah.
And it's been fun. I've actually converted a couple of people at work too, of just like, how can you build this thing without like a build step? And that, I like it. I like simple things that I can understand and tinker on. So
yeah, I've seen. It's really funny because back in the day, it was like, oh, it's horrible waiting for this Windows application to build. I can just write some HTML and see things come up. And now I think, when I see Angular or React apps build, they take longer than desktop applications to build sometimes. And I'm just like, well, what happened to our wonderful world of rapid cycle time? That's kind of funny.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Very cool.
Nice. And I think maybe one thing I'll highlight too is, so did mob time is kind of turned into a side project for you? Is that how it kind of got started? Was kind of or I mean, you told me earlier that it was needed for your mobbing at work, right? So
yeah, and like, I mean, needed is a very loose term. Like everyone kind of had a solution, but I was just like, I bet I could throw something together. It's actually weird. I've had this streak of like making applications for work that are based around timers.
Right.
So the history of that is, so we have two like coffee carafes in the office like kitchen, and I always wanted to know when it was ready, because I always wanted fresh coffee, and I don't mind brewing it, but if someone else brewed the coffee and I went to go get it, so I came up with a thing called Brew Time, which the naming just happened to be amusing. I actually totally forgot that I made the app when I made Mob Time. Then I was like, hey, the name's.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it was based on the same things. We had QR codes with a timer, and you would get a notification when things are up. Also written in Hyper App. Yeah. So that's a funny parallel.
And what I was gonna say too on that was, for me, my journey when I saw the light with kind of extreme programming and test-driven development and refactoring was on my own side project that I started. It started as just kind of something for fun, and now it's kind of used in a classroom. But I think there's a lot of benefit to experimenting, right? Like you have a new idea or practice or process, or like you said, a very minimal tech stack, size, load, and just to try out your own experiments on the side. And I think it was after training, and then I integrated that training into it. And I think that was where I had huge jumps in learning on side projects on something like that. And I know, Chris, you have some as well, right? But
yeah, absolutely. and out of necessity, I had made a mob timer a long time ago too. So yeah.
Were you part of the Mobster development team?
No, even before that. So I wrote the first ever mobbing timer. And then Mobster came from Dylan Kearns, who he was kind of making, he wanted to make a version that was kind of on Electron using Elm. And but I mean, there's like, it's really awesome just seeing like hundreds of different timers kind of come out of this whole thing. But the first one that I wrote was actually a WinForms application, believe it or not. And it, like, I was just like, how do I take over the whole screen and like prevent anybody from alt tabbing? And then eventually I wrote a Python version. So there's the Python mob timer as well. And the Python mob timer is the one that I typically end up using. But Aaron Griffith and I had worked with Dylan a couple of times at conferences and stuff. And so we contributed a little bit to the mob timer, or the Mobster project. And so, but yeah, I just love seeing all the variations of it. Some of them are just pure command lines, some of them have UIs, web-based, all that stuff. So.
Yeah, it's definitely really fun community. Well, I guess we're kind of coming up on time here. So is there anything you'd like to plug or share before we close out, Alex?
Vehicles are cool. Laravel shop. We do other stuff too. We do mobile. I think we do some desktop.
For our listeners, he's pointing to his T-shirt, which has a very nice logo on it.
Yeah, that's true. There's letters. There's even a logo. It's pretty great. So there's that. Obviously, Mob Time is my current main project, and if people really like using it or have suggestions, you can follow me in Twitter, mobtime_app, or you can go to mobtie.me because URL hacking is real cool. And I'm open to suggestions and pull requests and all sorts of things. It's all open source. My README is horribly out of date, but the code isn't. So yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll send people that way, and then we'll get links for some of the other stuff that we mentioned in the conversation today. So to everyone out there, thank you very much. If you think that this might be helpful for somebody, or if you just have somebody that really loves Vim that you might want to share this video with them, and or podcast. And thank you for joining us. Please like, subscribe, and thank you, Alex, for being on the show with us. And we will see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for having me.